Hello and welcome to Series 3 of Crisis What Crisis, a podcast designed to be a useful field guide as we all try to navigate and continue to come to terms with a dramatically changed world. Whether personal, professional or both, crisis is without doubt the new shared experience. I'm Andy Coulson, a former newspaper editor, Downing Street Director of Communications and one-time inmate of HMP Belmarsh. For the last 5 years, I've put all of my experience, the good and the bad, to use as a strategic advisor to business leaders. And I can tell you the bad has been just as useful as the good. And that got me thinking as the first lockdown began that there are plenty of great podcasts out there where you can hear stories of success, but there are far fewer where you can benefit from the experience of those whose lives have properly unraveled. So in Crisis What Crisis, I talk to the embattled, shamed, courageous, ruined, damaged, resilient, unlucky and lucky survivors of crisis. Some names will be familiar, some less so. Our guests share their experiences, though, with honesty, often with humour, but always in the hope that they might be useful to anyone facing down their own demons and challenges. Put simply, these are crisis conversations worth sharing. Stay tuned at the end of the episode when I'll give my thoughts and takeaways, the lessons, if you like, for when life unravels. And if you enjoy the podcast, please do subscribe and give us a rating and a review. It really helps make sure these stories reach an even wider audience of people who may find them useful. And that, in the end, is what it's all about. Crisis What Crisis is generously supported by Mindstream, a brilliant company who harness the power of music for personal well-being, whether it be music for meditation, to help focus, sleep, stress relief, yoga and fitness, rejuvenation, even grief and loss. Mindstream is there to improve human performance. I've tried it, it works, and I'd recommend having a listen to the Mindstream catalogue yourself. Just search Mindstream, that's mind with a Y, on Spotify. Thanks again for joining me. I'm absolutely delighted that my guest today is Nicky Campbell, one of Britain's best-loved broadcasters and presenters. From Radio 1 through the Wheel of Fortune, Watchdog, and onto the Radio 5 breakfast show, which is hosted for 18 years, Nicky has been a familiar, calming, and fundamentally decent voice for so many of us for so many years. But what's remarkable is that behind the success, behind the public profile, Nicky was dealing with a slow-moving crisis of the most traumatic kind. In his brilliant new book, One of the Family, Nicky lays bare that story, a boy adopted as a baby into a loving family in Edinburgh, but who, as he grows up, is quietly pushing against a growing emotional tide, a tide that would in 2013 eventually wash over him. That more extreme moment of crisis, a breakdown, led to a diagnosis of type 2 bipolar, and I'm delighted to say a recovery with the help of professionals and his family, including, crucially, his four-legged therapist, Maxwell, his Labrador. A dog who, passionate animal lover Nicky, also writes about with pride and emotion in the book. So this is a crisis conversation unlike any we've had before, with, I hope, lessons for those going through difficulties in their own lives, whatever the cause. Nicky Campbell, thank you for joining us on Crisis What Crisis. How are you today?
It's fine. Is it unlike any you had before? I mean, so many people suffer from mental health. It's been a kind of slow burn, but I mean, in your podcast, you've had people that have, come back from the brink and they've fought raging stuff. I've experienced what many people experience, and many people don't have a chance to get somebody to help them with. So, it was a very nice intro. Apart from that, I just,
one of our first guests, Martha Lane Fox, said that crisis isn't a competition.
No.
I think she was absolutely spot on. And that's my point, really, is that your story is unique, and it's not one. We have talked actually with another guest. I want to mention him a little bit later. Lem Cisse, the poet. Who found himself in care. We'll mention that a little bit later. And there were some similarities there, but also some very, very big differences in your story. But, I think you're being modest. I think the story is unique, and I think the story is powerful, but let's leave it there. This book is brilliant, Nicky, unbelievably honest and emotional. And if you don't mind me saying so, useful. The challenge of being adopted, most importantly, is at its centre, but also a range of other issues that will affect so many people who read it, I think. Is it the book, though, that you set out to write? Because
No,
at
really.
times you sound as surprised by what you're saying as the reader might be.
Yeah, no, that's such a good question. It wasn't really, because I wanted to do a book about my love for animals, my fight for animals, and my obsession for animals, which is actually part of my mental health issue as well, and drove me to the brink, that desperation. But then I wanted to sort of focus in on dogs, and my amazing dog Maxwell, who's meant so much to me because it took me back to my childhood dog Candy. So in a way, Maxwell's a kind of time tunnel that took me back to the ages of 0 to 11. And then I thought, well, if I write about how he's helped me and what he's done for me, and the magic that dogs impart on one's life, I thought, well, I've got to really explain how he's helped me. And I couldn't really swerve the breakdown because he helped me so much when I had the breakdown in 2013. So I thought, you know what it's like. You understand the media better than anyone. And your colleague, I remember discussing mental health issues with Euston Campbell, and he said, look, why did you do an interview with GQ about your bipolar? And I thought, I'm not ready. I don't want to become Mr. Bipolar, every single show, kind of, a bipolar type 2, a bipolar type 1 is far more severe. And I didn't want to sort of be, it's This Morning here. I love going on This Morning to plug shows. Yeah, it's great. And it's a great, but, it's although funny enough, I'm doing one soon because the cat's out of the bag. But that was what I was afraid of. So I said to Alistair, nah, not yet. And then I thought, well, if I'm going to be honest in the book, and the show you didn't mention on the way through is perhaps the most kind of high profile I've done, which is Long Lost Family on ITV, which is about beautifully done program about reuniting families and adoption.
Yeah, I want to talk about that.
I do it with Davina McCall, and I kind of genuinely thought we've asked people to lay bare the emotional intimacy of their life, and to tell us their stories, for want of a better word, and if I didn't do that, and their stories have inspired loads of people, and it's the show that people cross the street to say, oh, you do One Last Family. That's great. Not interested in me, they're interested in the show, which is I'm comfortable with that. But I thought if these people have been so honest, and I'm going to do this book, I've got to be completely honest. So I kind of gritted my teeth and got on with it and thought, okay, let's talk about that as well.
There's a lot to get through from a crisis perspective, but if it's all right with you, I'd like to start right at the beginning.
Very good place to start.
Your book details how you were born in a home in Edinburgh, where for 9 days of your life you remained with your birth mother, Stella Lackey. She'd come over from Ireland to have you. She was a single woman, a nurse, and for those 9 days you were together until, as arranged, you were handed to the amazing couple who would become your mum and dad, Sheila and Frank Campbell. As I say, reading the book, it was the start of a very, very slow-moving crisis for you, but it was also a moment that set your life in so many ways on such a positive course. We talk a lot on this podcast about the need to find positives in crisis, but it strikes me that you are, your family are, the embodiment of that strategy, if you like. Do you see it that way?
Yeah, but that's the paradox. No matter how happy you are, if you're given the narrative that you are special and you're chosen, which is far better than finding out you're adopted when you're 21 years old or whatever. Many people in Long Lost Family, were joining a football club at 13 and had to have their birth certificates and, oh, you're adopted, and dreadful realizations. And so I had that one on the one side, but being special means being different, and being chosen means being different. And I didn't want to be different. And I had this narrative from the beginning, which was, the proper thing to do, but it's very difficult to handle. There's this woman somewhere who's given you away. And that's the conflict. The conflict is you could not be happier. You've got the most amazing mum and dad in the world. And yet you feel different, and you don't want to feel different. And I talk about my 10th birthday in the book, where I was in a hotel in Inverness, on a sort of snug alcove with beige leather. It's funny how you can remember this stuff, isn't it? And there's a guy on the organ who looked like kind of Elvis Presley, and we were having high tea, one of those sort of cake stands and cakes, and then we were having ham sandwiches just on their own with mustard. This is back in the early 70s, of course, before cuisine kicked in. And then the birthday cake came in and the singing, happy birthday, happy birthday. I just remember bursting into tears and feeling utterly forsaken, utterly miserable, that I didn't belong. I didn't deserve to be there at that point, because I was meant to be someone else. I didn't know who I was meant to be, but I shouldn't have been there. It was only just a little twist of fate that I was there. Now I'm articulating it now, but I felt it then. I felt everything that I'm saying now. I can use big words now, but it's exactly what I felt. And
I'm going to read the passage actually from the book, because it was a moment that I wanted to ask you about. So if I may, I'm just going to read the short passage just to add to what you just said. Nothing felt real, and I knew in a moment of great clarity that has never left me for a moment since, what it was like to be the imposter. How could anyone be celebrating my birthday, the day on which my mum and dad had not even known who I was, the day on which my mother, who'd given birth to me, had already decided she didn't want me. I was the biggest fake of all. I mean, it's just heartbreaking, Nicky, on so many levels. Not least for the idea for me that you felt as a 10-year-old boy just so, alone, when in actuality you're surrounded by love.
Exactly. And they are my mum and dad.
Yeah.
My adopted mum and dad are my real mum and dad. It's the great kind of paradox and conflict of adoption. A lot of people, I'm not going to generalize and say everybody that is adopted feels like that, but I think there's something in the heart and core of it that there's a soupçon of it in everyone. And I know a lot of people feel it very, very deeply. And doing Long Lost Family for 11 years took me back to it and taught me so many lessons about my birth mother and why she did the things she did and why she was the way she was when we met her. I say we and my birth sister. And so, yeah, it was, but you're right. It's still difficult. It's still difficult coming to terms and trying to explain the fact that you were blissfully happy, but incredibly fragile, incredibly emotional, fragile. It's difficult to explain that, because a lot of people might think, oh, what are you complaining about? First world problems. There you are in a nice terraced house in Edinburgh, sent to a private school, all that stuff. Although they didn't have any money, they just had that priority to,
Yeah. There's a fair bit of that in the book. Your natural inclination to kind of push against that. Oh God, people are thinking why, that I'm thinking why me, that I'm kind of wallowing around. You deal with that quite a lot in the book. That's your natural instinct, isn't it? And that perhaps is why you didn't talk about it before finally, you did in the book.
Yeah, it's a bit defensive, but what cheers me is thus far people have messaged me and said, oh my goodness, that bit was just like my life, and you were talking about my life, and that's exactly how I felt. And that feeling of being an imposter, even people say, oh, I'm not adopted at all, but I understand that. I understand that conflict, meeting my birth mother. I understand. Thank you very much for talking about the mental health issue. And that has been kind of overwhelming, genuinely moving, because as a broadcaster, it's all about reaching out and connecting with people. And the fact that it has seemingly done that with so many people is an amazing, amazing feeling. And because it makes me feel part of the family as well. Yeah. It makes me feel that I'm not alone, because there's so many, like, we're all in this orphanage, all these people, we're all in one great big orphanage trying to find our way home. And I just, you feel that strength in numbers, people saying, yeah. And it's a bloody amazing feeling. It really is.
I mentioned Len Ceesay earlier. I don't know how much of his story but there are some parallels, but there's some very, very big differences. Young mum comes over from Ethiopia, forced really to give him up, and later prevented from getting him back, remarkably. Fostered by a couple for the first 12 years of his life, and then they give him back. They don't actually adopt him. He's fostered for that period of time. He believes they're his mum and dad, and then he's handed back into the care system, and all sorts of kind of horrors ensue. Very different story. But we talked with Lem about his search for identity, right, in very different ways, but also this battle to belong. But at the heart of it, an ability, and this is where perhaps there is a parallel, the ability from both of you to forgive. How did you manage to find that forgiveness, Nicky?
My birth mother. Well, that's another twin track thing. The narrative I was given, if I can explain it, was this wonderful, generous, wise woman who wasn't able to look after me, and so I was put up for adoption, and we're your mummy and daddy now. And so I had this thing in my mind all the time of this incredible woman sort of floating around in a cloud of wonderfulness. But then at the same time, that's why I got my single tracks and double tracks mixed up, because there was a real double track back then, which was, well, why did she if she was so wonderful, and if she's a nurse and she's looking after people, why did she give me away? And why didn't she want me? Why did she reject me? And so that narrative was quite an emotionally abrasive one. And the reason I'm trying to get my head around, having had the vaccination yesterday and a bit of brain fog, what I'm trying to explain is that later in life, once I had met her, I then found it very difficult to come to terms with what she was like as compared with what I thought she was going to be like, and how little she was giving and was able to explain, and how superficial her existence as regards me and my birth sister was. Attempting to just step in and become our mummy again without any analysis or explanation or what happened or exposition of her feelings. It was only later on that I came to understand that a little bit more, and the reasons for what she did, and also the clues that were there about how she really felt. So it's quite complicated, and that's why things are quite complex.
You have a phrase, a short.
Does that make any sense?
It does make sense. And you had a short phrase in the book that you used to kind of sum up your disappointment in the lack of detail or engagement in the way that you've just described. You said it was all trifles. Trivia, trifles, just stuff and nonsense. Just superficiality.
Well, that's the thing, yeah. But then again, with my defensive thing there, for goodness sake, what do you expect? And this is what I've sort of come to realize. She went through so much. She had 2 babies adopted within 18 months of each other in Edinburgh, me and my birth sister, who later found her, then found me. And it was so much in her life, and she was bipolar. So there we are. Adopted people are always looking for a connection. She was bipolar type 1.
Yeah.
And I was, I just thought, what is this? This chaotic woman comes into the hotel lobby in Dublin with her hair everywhere, and she'd been overslept because she was so worried. She'd taken a sleeping tablet. This was not what
you're what, sort of 29, was it? About that age when you found and connected with your birth mother?
29 years old.
Yeah.
It was the anniversary of the Easter Rising, I remember, in Dublin. And it was that weekend I couldn't get a drink. There was some bizarre law back then. You couldn't get a drink.
Right.
At Easter or something like that. I remember. Because boy, in the evening or the Friday before, boy, did I need one.
Yeah.
I could get one on the Saturday when I met her. And that's when I had a pint of Guinness. And I went to the loo just after I'd met her, and I turned to wash my hands, and I saw a different face in the mirror. A face I'd never seen before, because I'd just seen somebody to whom I was related, and it was all kind of the Stephen King moment of it. But she was, the first thing she said to me, which kind of made complete sense later in my life, was after she sat down, the first thing she said to me was, "Do you like dogs?" I thought at the time, what a bizarre thing to say, but I actually think it's a fantastic litmus test of empathy now.
Yes.
I've come to understand that, And I did understand it, but it took me aback what she'd said. But then it was just, and a header and the number 42 bus, and then we did a sandwich, and we did that, and I live in this place, and it's over tonight, and there was nothing, absolutely nothing. So where was this woman? And that's the thing, when she wanted to be my mummy. And I was 29 years old, and it was like she was just like stepping back in as if nothing had happened. She'd had no curiosity about my life. She'd no curiosity about my family or my upbringing. It was just like a raise that 29 years, and it was almost like she was going to pick me up in swaddling and pick me out of the car. And we went around to her sheltered housing flat that night. She made me food. She was clucking around me, fussing around me as if this was the beginning. Meanwhile, there at home at 105 Mayfield Road in Edinburgh, my mum and dad, beloved mum and dad, who'd done everything for me, extraordinary people, just wonderful people. I don't mean that glibly. I mean, they were wonderful people.
Yes.
We're sitting there, the telly half on, looking at the clock, wondering how I was getting on. And it was just killing me. It was tearing me apart, because you're not meant to feel nothing. When you meet your birth mother, you're meant to have a kind of railway children moment. And I just felt nothing. And to feel nothing is crushing, because you feel guilty about the fact that your real mummy and daddy, you've been disloyal to them, and you feel guilty and loads of self-loathing about the fact that you've met the woman who gave birth to you, and you feel zilch.
Yeah. So long lost families, right? Is that a theme that you see often? Is that a chain of events that kind of plays out, even if it's not on screen, that you can recognize that pattern in the people that you're talking to?
Not really, because it's self-selected, because these people are really desperate to do this. And I was, and what's the difference? I mean post reunion, really. Yeah. But I always think about long lost family. It's not about the future. It's about the past. It's about reconciling yourself with the past and slaking the curiosity and finding out what really happened. And then you can move on. Then you get a kind of more of a sense of yourself. But interestingly, that's a really interesting question, looking at long lost family, because, and it's just occurred to me, we have a pretty rigorous, what is called crudely a psych test. Before people are accepted to take part, because we have to check that they're psychologically robust enough. There's big stuff about this at the moment, with the Love Island row and all those sort of reality shows, and we are the gold standard on long lost family. There's a BBC show that's just come out about DNA tracing, and lots of people are actually saying we would never do that. We would never give them that news on camera.
But you must have been aware of the risks. That's because you, when you first got involved in the program, were acutely aware of what you were kind of, what box you were taking the lid off potentially for people.
Yeah, but I'd never have passed the psych test, I don't think, and I don't think Stella would have passed the psych test.
Right.
On that at that particular time, because it's, why do you want to do this? Are you sure you want to do this? And I might have scraped through, but I think she was too kind of fragile. But it's okay to feel nothing. I've said many times in the back of a cab on the way to a reunion, I've said, how do you feel? I said, I don't know how to feel. I said, well, it's okay not to know how to feel. It's okay to feel nothing. You just go, you just go with the flow of it. I do think it's weird when people have just met and they're calling their birth mother who they've just met mum. That kind of makes me go, oh. It's not, but then everyone's different. And some people who are doing that have not had a good childhood. Yeah. Some people and adoption. Some people who saying that say they've had a good adoption, but I still feel there's something in there that's not quite right. And some people have had an amazing adoption, like me, but still want to put that final piece in the jigsaw puzzle. I mean,
the one of the themes of your book, obviously, anchored around the love of animals, but specifically the dogs that you've had in your life, Maxwell most importantly. And we'll talk about Maxwell later, but your dog Candy played an incredibly important part in those early years of your life in Edinburgh. just give us a flavour of how important that was. It's almost in those kind of, you described that birthday party in the years leading up to that point, how important Candy was to you.
He was incredibly important to me. He was my human canine, human dog. I was his dog, human, Homo sapien canine. We were siblings. Everything was about the two of us. I remember from the earliest age crawling around with him and sniffing and play fighting. We used to play fight on the shelf, shelf, is that the right word? On the sofa just in front of the front window. And I remember play fighting one day, this woman coming up the garden path going, "Your child is being mauled by a dog." I remember my mum saying, "Oh, no, it's fine. Don't worry, it's fine." And we were just so close to each other, and we loved each other. That bond was incredible. And we used to, I mean, I've told this story, but we used to sniff everything together when people arrived at the front door. Candy and I used to sniff them. And it was excruciating and embarrassing for mum and dad, because sometimes the sniffing was like not really what you would want to sniff. And it was like, "Damn Candy, damn Candy, damn Nicky, damn Nick." So visitors were horrified by that. We were just, like that. We were confrères, we were comrades, we were inseparable. And so that time I came home and he wasn't there and he'd been put to sleep. I skipped off the bus and ran down the road from the bus stop and ran up the path, and he wasn't upstairs looking. Normally he'd see me and then he'd run downstairs and greet me and meet me. And that moment is it will never leave me, coming in. And mum saying that he's been Candy's dead. He's been put to sleep. God, I can remember it. I can remember the physical feeling of desperation. Now, some people might say, "Oh, come on," but for me, that first 11 years, he was my protector. He made everything make sense, and when I was with him, everything made sense, and I felt safe. He was my safe haven. And he was adopted too, and I saw us kind of as two, because he was adopted. He wasn't my mum's natural child, but he was adopted. I saw it as like he was adopted because there was a puppy next door. The academics next door. I remember the academics next door. Their dog Judy has had a litter. She escaped one night and she came back pregnant, and so she was a thoroughbred fox terrier, and he was what used to be called a mongrel. Now it's called a cross.
Yeah.
And he was just absolutely gorgeous. So that was a seminal moment in my life, and it made me afraid of that sort of having a dog until things were really going.
You kept a photo of him on your desk throughout, haven't you?
I've got one over there. Yeah, a photo of him up there.
And he discovered much later that he wasn't the first dog in your life. That when you were in that home that I mentioned in Edinburgh, before, and those days before you were, those 9 days before you were adopted, that there was a dog called Toby, and Toby would sit under your cot and simply wouldn't leave you. I mean, listen, you passionately believe in the importance and the role that dogs play in our lives. I mean, how was that to find out? I mean, that must have been well, Stella told me at the meeting, and it was an incredible moment. And it was a bonding moment. There was a couple of bonding moments. There was a moment at that first meeting where she just turned into the woman she probably was before all the problems and before the breakdowns. And she leant back in a chair and sort of looked with her eyes cocked, sort of looked with her head to one side as if to say, "Oh, this is weird. This is look where we are. Look who it is. Look what I am, and look what's happening." And I just saw a little vignette, and then she told me about Toby, which was a highlight. Apart from "Do you like dogs?" I think she might have been leading on to that. And Toby was a little collie cross who was in the boarding house where she had me in Portobello,
And Toby guarded me and growled if anyone came near me, and was on my bed. And she was a matron at a hospital, but I think all the rules and regulations and cleanliness had gone out the window. And because he loved dogs so much. So he was hot. I would have got the smell of him, and I would have been used to the presence of dogs. And when I went, he stayed at the window and whined after the 9 days. And when I had my breakdown and I went to my psychiatrist, Stephen Pereira, I told him about that, and he said, imprint, absolutely imprint from the earliest time and earliest, it would have absolutely impacted psychologically on you.
Yeah.
That thing with dogs. So, I mean, it's not fanciful, is it? It's science.
No, listen, it's not fanciful. I fundamentally agree with you. From my, I didn't get my first dog until I was well into my 30s, but I couldn't agree more. Let's fast forward, if we can, a bit, Nicky, to another moment of drama, if you like, when you're a teenager and your mum pulls you to one side and asks if any of the girls are adopted, which is a hell of a question to get from your mum. And she tells you she's asking you this because you have a sister who might well be living in Edinburgh, that Stella had another child adopted by a different father. I mean, tell me about that moment, and because it struck me reading the book that was the next kind of wave of kind of crisis that sort of led to another crisis, if you like. Is that how you reflect on it or not?
Well, it's amazing you've picked that up, because I think it is an extraordinary moment in my life. She's stalking around outside. Mum's walking up and down outside my room, and I've kind of got my guitar and my poster of Olivia Newton-John or whatever, and the atom bomb exploding, and the girl leaning over to pick up the tennis ball, all that stuff. And then she comes in, and I know she's nervous and she wants to speak to me. And then she mentions, I think she told me before, but I'd kind of swept it away because there's always a lot to deal with. I think she told me before. I was very resistant to this. So she left leaflets in my room saying, if you ever want to trace and you're adopted, this is someone you can. And I kind of, whoa, who am I? What are you doing? And so you kind of rail against it. So she came in and she told me this. And she said, you've got a sister. And I kind of thought, do I know this? I think I do. I think I know this. But it was still a revelation. You know what I mean? And she might have told me years and years and years ago, and I'd just not focused on it, or I'd forgotten it, or I'd forgotten that I'd ever remembered it. And she said, any of your, because I was starting to see girls and getting the group together on a Friday, Saturday night, are any of your girlfriends adopted? And it was a very weighty and concerned question. And if you think about it now, and this is the whole issue with sperm donation, isn't it? Spreading the seed over many a county.
Yes.
It's seriously, it's worrying, isn't it? That situation. Because I went to this school called the Edinburgh Academy. Famous alumni Magnus Magnusson and Robert Louis Stevenson, and St George's was the school, like the sister school, and kind of all our girlfriends came from St George's, and all their boyfriends came from the Edinburgh Academy. A disappointing kind of gene pool, as it were. And so, but I said no. Well, I had a friend who was adopted, but she was younger than me. So I kind of thought, part of me thought, don't be so ridiculous. Why would I, at 16, have a 17-and-a-half-year-old girlfriend? What a ludicrous idea. But there was that. So she was very much aware of that.
But in fact, much later, you discover that as a teenager, you were in fact in the same house as your sister, that you had a mutual friend.
Well, they were big sister figures.
Neither of you had a clue at the time, of course.
No.
Incredible.
Slightly unreachable sort of older girls. But when I met her, Esther, we did that whole Edinburgh thing. Oh, do you know what? Oh, yeah, it's a friend. And she said one of her best friends was Julia Kreitman. And I said, Matt Kreitman he's one of my best friends, her little brother. He was in the year below me, but Matt kind of used to hang around with Matt. It's funny, he was in the year below me, but he used to hang around.
Even now.
Yeah, even now. But he used to hang around with Matt. And I said, she said, I stayed with the Kreitmans over one summer when my parents were away. I said, which summer was that? She said, it was 1978. And I said, well, we were round in the snug with the L-shaped sofa and the bean bags and the telly and the smoking Benson and Hedges and kicking their shoes off and coming back from school, watching the World Cup. I watched Archie Gemmel's goal, I'm pretty sure, in that particular room. And I was with Ian Glenn, who went on to be in the Game of Thrones, and Matthew, and I remember Julia, and I remember Julia's friend. And that was Esther.
I mean,
and she remembers Matthew's friends.
Yeah. I mean, just incredible. Despite this, this sort of, as I say, I keep referring to it as a very sort of slow moving crisis. I hope that's the right way to describe it. But you succeed. You have a drive, a determination, a talent, of course, and your rise in broadcasting, in presenting is meteoric. From making hoax calls, as you describe it in the book, into local radio stations, in phone-ins, to your own show on Radio 1, Top of the Pops. It really seems like only a few years. I don't know how many years it actually was, but it was pretty swift rise. Wheel of Fortune, huge television program, other big jobs follow. Do you think this crisis, this kind of undercurrent in your life, gave you drive?
Yeah, I think it did. That kind of look at me, Ma. I'm going to prove myself. I'm going to be someone. I'm going to make something of this. I'm going to look who I am. Look what I've done. And when I actually traced Stella, one of the reasons was, one of the things I was thinking, not the reasons, but one of the things I was thinking was, gosh, she's going to be so impressed with me because I'm on the telly. I was pretty impressed with me. So she's going to be pretty impressed with me because I'm on the telly on this show, 4-channel telly, Andy.
Yeah.
14 million,
Yeah.
ITV.
Yeah.
Monday night.
Yeah.
That's why people still say it, a Wheel of Fortune still. And that was, I think it is. It's that drive. It's that prove myself. It's that, I'm going to take this bull by the horns and do stuff. And sometimes when I look at the old Top of the Pops and I look at the old Wheel of Fortunes on Challenge TV, I don't do that routinely, but occasionally I cast my eye on Top of the Pops because I get abusive texts on a Friday night saying, I hated you then and I still hate you, or thanks for getting in touch, or
you gotta love Twitter. You gotta love Twitter.
or nice ones saying, God, look at your hair. And I look at myself and I can see that kind of mania sometimes. And it's not just the studio mania of excitement. I can see a genuine, manic thing going on, and you either like it or you don't. And I kind of, the case I hated you then and I hate you now. I kind of think, well, I'm half with you. I don't really like me. I don't like myself very much either. But you're able
because we do to have this conversation from totally different angles on this podcast about the need to find the positive out of the crisis. So you do draw a line. Obviously, you've drawn the very clear, entirely legitimate line between your crisis and the things that have gone wrong in your life and the problems that it has brought you. But you do also draw a line between the crisis and these positives. You do think that it fueled you in a positive way in that regard.
Yeah, it did. It gave me drive. It gave me ambition because I needed to prove myself because I didn't really know who I was. So I needed to find out who I was and prove myself. Now, there's a million people who've, succeeded or done well in what they do. Said, well, why is that different from me? But I think I had a particular bone that I wouldn't get rid of, and it was pretty quick from doing local radio in 1983 to going to Capital Radio, to going to Radio 1, to going to Top of the Pops, to going to the Wheel of Fortune in 1988. It was pretty quick. And of course, as you're sort of swept through with that, you do to an extent believe your own publicity. And it's quite intoxicating, the whole thing. But because you're only in your 20s one is only in one's 20s, and all that's going on. So it's pretty heady, and it's a distraction as well from all the other stuff.
Yeah. So we're going to fast forward again to 2013. The success has continued. Long Lost Family, you mentioned, other programs, and by now you're presenting and have been for a while, the Radio 5 breakfast show. Sort of every day you're helping the country, the nation, sort of navigate the big issues of the day. It's a proper intellectual challenge that you're meeting brilliantly, but you're doing it whilst unraveling. You've become depressed with manic obsessions, a pathological hatred of littering, later a very worthy but entirely manic focus on animal welfare, specifically the plight of elephants that regularly leaves you in tears. How do you reflect on that before Euston, which we'll get to? How do you reflect on that period, that time now? How were you coping and operating, in the midst of such an unraveling?
Well, I think that when I look back at the kind of mania I see on the screen sometimes at the top of the Pops, and I see that person and I know what's going on in that person's mind, that was kind of aided to an extent by the high points of my bipolar, but I was always having the low points all my life. And I didn't realize anything, because mental health problems, what happened to other people. And I just thought incredibly low, in bed for a couple of days. I just thought, it's just the way I am. And that's a big message to people. You needn't be like that. You can deal with it. But I did by the time I got onto 5 Live. And on the animal front, I used to be here in my study like for hours on end, every afternoon, Saturday afternoon, Sunday afternoon, looking at pictures. I wanted to save every animal on earth, crying, weeping, looking at the terrible things that's happening. It's a terrible rabbit hole to go down. And Tina would say, "What are you doing?" "Well, I'm just working. And I was up on my own in Salford, at the flat in Salford, which I have, where 5 Live was based. And that was consuming me all day and every day. And I was just bursting into tears all over the place. And it was, I was sort of spiraling downwards. But still, I've got autopilot. And the autopilot, it just kicked in and I could do it. I could do autopilot. We're joined by David Cameron,
Yeah.
Go for it, written down the kind of stuff. I can act, I can do it. I can ask him the questions, and then the interview's over and my partner does the interview, and then I kind of drown again, It's weird. Was it like that? It was job done. Yeah.
Collapse.
And I could interact and I can do that. I can. I'm talking about the worst days, the worst mornings. I could do it. The best mornings I was kind of flying. So that's kind of good. That's kind of easy. That kind of, it suits the role. It's a job that suits the highs very much. If I was only in a studio debate, to bring people in and getting points and facilitating, orchestrating is the word, debate. So that's suitable. You do things according to your talents and perhaps and abilities and perhaps your mental state as well. And that was really, really good. That's probably why I'm quite good at it.
Yeah.
So if I may say that, so it really was the case. One particular morning, I was looking at this story in the Bengal Times or the Indian Times, and I think I put in the book that it was in the Kerala forest, but I looked it up, and it was in West Bengal, and it was May, I think, or June 2013, and they said elephants had been hit by a train. They go through improbable and possible and terrible speeds through the forest, and a whole family of elephants had been hit, and 3 or 4 of them had been taken out and sliced to pieces. And there was this picture of this set of pictures, and it was there was like being pushed over the edge after everything I was fighting for. And I had meetings. I was in meetings at the House of Parliament trying to do something about ivory and, part of that campaign. And I couldn't handle it. There's desperation. Nobody was doing anything. And these wonderful, sentient, intelligent, beautiful, sensitive creatures. And there they were. And the family had tried to get back and they were driven away by firecrackers. The family thing. There was the matriarch dead.
Yeah.
the matriarch dead, and the other families and the babies were trying to get back, and they weren't allowed to get back because they had to clear the tracks, and it was just a grim and ghastly scene. Now you can Google it. It was just, and so meanwhile I'm looking at that, and then I'm going, Rachel's going, and it's 7:50, and I'm going, and we're joined now by the president of the Society of Motor Manufacturers. Good morning. Let me ask you, so I'm sort of slipping in and out, right? Meanwhile, I'm just dying.
Yeah.
And I think perhaps but you have to put a lid on it. It makes it even worse when you don't have to put a lid on it anymore. And so I walked to the station because I had to go up to Salford. So I was walking down Euston, I sort of wended my way up Warren Street and all that, up Great Portland Street, and then up to Euston. I was just
Try and describe the feeling at that point.
Yeah.
Just overwhelmed.
Yeah, it's just the whole world was falling in on me. And I eventually got to Euston. I said, I can't do anything. What's the point? What is the point? And that's the worst it ever got. What is the point? We're all just passing through. We're here today. We're gone tomorrow. So what? And then I got to the bit of grass outside Euston Station, which is now taxi rank, but used to be a bit of grass there. You walked up, and I just fell. My briefcase to one side, and everything, sort of money falling out, and all sorts of stuff. And I'm just on the ground. And I'm literally heaving and weeping. And that's probably the moment when somebody walked by and said, yeah, that's the fellow on the Wheel of Fortune. But anyway, there I was. It was desperate. I had to bring in a note of levity there.
Yeah.
As
I'm watching you, we're recording this on Zoom, as I'm watching you sort of, retell that story, you're feeling it again, aren't you? You kind of, it's you've not lost the memory of what it felt like.
You don't.
That moment at all. It is still with you.
Yeah, it is, and you don't lose the moment of when you come home and your little dog's dead. You don't lose any of these moments. The moment that you're in the restaurant and the cake comes in and you feel you don't deserve it. You never lose any of these moments. This was one of the most powerful moments of my life, and I rang home, and Tina, who'd seen it coming, she knew it was bad. She knew I was, had something undiagnosed, but it came to a head because I could put a lid on it and I could control it. And she knew I was manic, and she knew I had obsessions and behaved in strange ways sometimes, the obsessions and depressions. And she said, come home to me, come home to the girls, and come home to Maxwell, because she knew how much that connection meant. And so I went home, because with a dog, with my Maxwell, who's I connect with so much, you don't have to explain, you don't have to articulate and put words together in a sentence, because those that you love with the best intention, and I would do it. So how are you feeling? What do you need? What can I get you? What would make you feel better? Do you want to go up to bed? Do you want something to eat? Do you want a cup of tea or whatever? Do you want to? I'll tell you what. Do you want a bath? Why do you have a bath? You feel better if you have a bath. And I just, because the minute somebody says that to you, you've got to focus on why they're asking you that question. And they're asking you that question because you're feeling the way you are, and you don't want to have that constant reminder, because you don't need to be constantly reminded, because it's killing you inside. Whereas that's my West Highland Terrier in the background, one of them. Yeah. Whereas Maxwell, the dog, he understands. He doesn't know that he understands, but he understands because they're on a different level. Like the wolf pack, they have to know how every member of the wolf pack is functioning for the wolf pack to function properly, and it's all sense, and it's they're incredibly emotionally switched on animals, and you don't have to explain. He just knows. Yeah. And when he came up and he put his head on me, I heard his little tinkling collar, and he leapt up on the bed, and he put his paw on me, and put his head on my chest, and it was like this kind of amazing warm feeling of love. And I know that he knew. I know that he knew that I needed help, and that was a moment. It really was. It was an incredible moment. And Then Tina got me to see someone. I went to the GP, and the GP said, "See someone." I'm in a very fortunate position that I could pay for that. There's many people, most people, not able to get properly diagnosed, not able to get the right drugs, and I do feel that I'm incredibly lucky that was the situation. And we had a few sessions, and he had a bit of paper, and we talk about everything. It's quite difficult to talk about stuff like this, but he said, "Imagine I'm not here. Just talk. And he made lots of diagrams and lines pointing, and we'd had a few sessions, and he didn't say much. He had lines pointing, and he asked me a couple of questions, and I thought, oh, you're good. And then after about 4 weeks, he said, before he came to his final diagnosis, do you have any mental health in the family? I said, well, no. And I said, my dad's sister, I think, was schizophrenic. Talking about mum and dad, adopted mum and dad.
Yeah.
And mum's cousin Lizzie has had psychotic events or whatever, and she's not been well, and she's on. And then I thought, oh no. He said, "Is there any history of bipolar in your family?" And I went, yeah, family, yeah. My birth mother is bipolar. He went, oh, yeah. That's what she bipolar type 1, or well, I explained. I can't remember what happened there, but it emerged that I was bipolar type 2, and she was bipolar type 1, which is more severe, more extreme. And that was a moment, because it wasn't a good thing, it wasn't a bad thing, it was just a meaningful thing. It was a connection, and it kind of took me to her. And Esther, my birth half sister, who's very clever, and that's why she finds Stella very, very difficult, because Esther got a first in maths from St Andrews University. Who gets a first in maths? Yeah. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous, right? So she was very analytical, and she did lots of research, and she said that if you do have a bipolar condition, it can be ameliorated and mitigated by a good upbringing and lots of love in the upbringing. And so maybe that was the case as well. But that was a moment. So that's basically it. And then I got drugs, which I take every night. Sometimes I forget to take, and Tina says, "Have you taken your drugs?" I said, no, maybe I didn't last night. Maybe I didn't. So that's it. That's the story of the blues.
And did you? At what point did you? Because I understand it with type 2 in particular. Environment can have an effect, right? Your upbringing can have an effect negatively, or positively, but obviously positively.
That's what Esther said.
And no doubt that the loving environment that you were passed into
saved me.
Had saved you. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the ultimate positive, kind of in a way, from a crisis.
Yeah. Yeah.
They were caring for you in ways that perhaps they didn't even realize and know.
That's true. Yeah, that is true. That secure unit, a family unit. Which meant everything.
Your mum and dad were amazing people. Your dad, as you describe in the book, briefly saw some horrors in World War II, and your mum played an important part in the D-Day landings. Your
radar,
not directly, but indirectly, I should say.
Radar,
your dad sadly died in 1996, I think, and your mum very sadly died while you were writing the book, aged 96. But I think I'm right in saying that there was sort of nothing left unsaid in relation to what's in the book with Mum, if I can ask such a personal question. I mean, it feels as though you've dedicated your book to her. It feels as though that was, in some ways, a really great process to be going through. at that stage in your life and that stage in her life?
Mm. It was. We had lots of conversations. So I said, "Do you remember Candy that day and this day? And do you remember what age I was when that happened?" And she was very excited about the book. She thought it was really interesting, and she loved Maxwell, and Maxwell absolutely adored her. So she was, she was a great source and a great solace and a great support as well throughout it. And it was at that time as well that I. Strange, isn't it? It's the parallels, the twin track again. It was at that time that I thought to eventually open the letters, because loads of letters had come from my birth mother, and I just stopped. They were kind of illegible scrolls, just like the phone calls which used to come late at night, just blah 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 blah, which is a bit hypocritical for me because I'm prone to blah 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 as well. But late at night and just at the wrong time, and it was just a kind of senseless cascade of trivia and nothingness. Just white noise, nothing. That's what Estefan. So, who's my father? Who's my father? I mean, she took years to find out who her father is. That's frustrating for anyone.
Yes.
You know, when she knows very well who her father is, and I had to find out who her father is through my birth father, who happened to know him. Oh, and because we were both in the cops together, and right. So that was the sort of brick walls that that we were facing, and it's nothing coming back. And so I sat down one night and I had these letters that I'd never opened from her, still sealed in envelopes. And I'd often thought about them and felt uncomfortable by the fact that I hadn't opened them. I'd come into her life, which was a joyful thing for her. And I mean, she was so pleased that we did, don't get me wrong. And then I sat down and I poured myself a whiskey, and Maxwell was beside me, and I opened the letters one night and read them all. And there was stuff in there which, I deciphered them all. And there was stuff in there which kind of made sense. There's one sentence she said, everyone who matters knows about you. And that's so much about her life, and that she had to be so guarded and sheltered and careful. And it was just such a massive thing to admit that there had been this side to her life, this wild, frankly, sexual side. She was 36 and our fathers were both in their early 20s. Yeah. Manic flights of excitement. And
so it's a similar story for
abandon.
Both. Yeah.
A similar story for both, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, cops and shifts and nurses. And and so I opened this and I read them, and it was lines, and I remembered at our first meeting again, because I'd said in that hotel foyer in 1989, I said, well, what are your kind of hobbies? And she said, well, I like literature, and I like William Butler Yeats, and I enjoy. Do you know The Wild Swans at Cool? I said, no, I don't. I know the one about the worst are full of passionate intensity, and all that one. That's a good one. The Second Coming. I don't know any others really. Everyone knows The Second Coming. And so I didn't think about that poem. I'm literally sat on the sofa, and I'm writing the book, obviously. So I want to know stuff, and I want to find out stuff, and I think I should, because I'm writing my own head, and had been for a long time. And I remembered this poem that she's spoken about, and I Googled the poem, and it was it was The Wild Swans at Cool, and it was about 59 swans. And this is the thing, 59 swans, because one of the swans had flown, one of the swans had gone, one of the swans was missing, and one of the swans would never return. And that was...
Wow. So like the question, do you like dogs?
Yeah.
She's sending you the subtlest of signals.
Kind of, yeah, from time, yeah. She mentioned that within the first 10 minutes of our meeting. Out of this morass of nonsense and trivia, The Wild Swans at Cool, as she said. That's my favourite poem. It was just a moment of...
Extraordinary.
Yeah, the profound, intelligent, sensitive woman that she once was and should have been. But I'm glad she was the way she was.
Well, this is, we all have a book with a happy ending, and yours, does have a happy ending, but it's got this kind of deeper element to it. You talked several times, you've referenced several times the paradox that was kind of sitting behind this, this tide as we've described it, and you through all these dramas and moments of of real crisis, you finally resolve the paradox. That's the right way of putting it. That you conclude that life is complicated.
Mm-hmm.
There's very little black and white in life. That most of it and most people sit somewhere in the grey, including your birth mother. Is that about right?
It is about right. Families are multifariously many varied things, ever changing forms, and just as you could say to somebody in the back of a cab as they're about to meet their birth mother and they say, I don't know how to feel. It's okay to say, it's okay that you don't know how to feel. And it's okay to say that, you know what, it's complicated. There's no use in trying to simplify it. Your birth mother gave birth to you, and now you've come to some kind of understanding of why she was the way she was. It'll always stay with me, the fact that I didn't connect more, but I couldn't. It was nothing to connect with. And when I met Esther, it was a huge relief that she said the same thing. There we were in the orphanage together, and we felt the same. And my adoptive mum and dad, and my real mum and dad, and the siblings, and there's my sister Fiona, and there's my kids, and they're amazing, and Tina's amazing. So yeah, I come to some kind of making sense of it. That's where we get to. And that mum's funeral was the last thing I wrote about, and it was, if I can say, it was a joyful affair, because people came from near and far to celebrate an extraordinary woman, a woman of warmth and wisdom. And she was a social worker, and she lit up a room, and she was a beautiful person. Not perfect, who is? No one is. I would be worried. She wasn't the perfect birth mother of my imagination, floating through the hallway of the Dublin hotel like the Virgin Mary, or the far from Virgin Mary, and then beatifying everybody, But Mum was amazing. He was bloody amazing, and I was so lucky to be adopted by Frank and Sheila Campbell. Her funeral was great, and just seeing my girls up there as well. They adored her.
Yeah,
they adored Granny Sheila, and seeing my girls up there. Bria read some Burns, and Isla played her flute, and Lila and Kirsty read poems, and they just to see their grief. I said it was joyful, but it was a joyful day all in all, because we had the grief, and we had the tears, the ocean of tears, and then we had laughs as well. We had great laughs and great music, and we came into the overture from The Sound of Music, and I just remember 1976 being at home with the fire on, and the world TV premiere of The Sound of Music was on, and I remember the smell of turkey, and it was a big thing because we loved The Sound of Music in our family. And there it was, it started. Irving Kussler production or whatever it was, that yellow writing over and then there she is on the hill. But the overture, there was a bit in it. Dum 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 dum. I remember Dad jingling the money in his pocket, saying, "That's a bloody good tune. That's a bloody good tune." And so we played that, and so I had all these amazing, warm memories of that, and we had laughs and we had tears. And then we went to a hotel, and we all got pissed. You can't do that anymore.
Wonderful. You can't do that anymore.
Yeah,
Nicky, thank you so much for telling us your story. We really appreciate it. And as I said at the start, I think it has lessons there for people who are going through all manner of difficulties in their lives. I'm going to finish, if I may, as we always do, by asking you for your crisis cures. 3 things that you kind of lean on in the tricky times. Can't be another person. I'm afraid I'm probably going to have to say that it can't be Maxwell either, because we've talked about him.
Yeah, that's right. Can't be a dog, can't be a person, can't be a being. No.
Can't be a being. So what comes to mind?
Well, music-wise, I've been a Beatle obsessive all my life. Me and my record player and the Beatles singles when I was growing up. I fell in love with the Beatles when I picked up my sister's cassette, and there was this album called With the Beatles, and I must have been 12. If you think about it, it's not long after they split up. But it's, and I remember putting it on and hearing "Close Your Eyes and I'll Kiss You," and I just fell in love with them, and then I just discovered. And they just spoke to me, and they still do. There's a magic. It's like The Sound of Music, actually, a transcendent magic, greater than the sum of the parts about the Beatles. And I remember Alan Freeman when I met him. He was a dear man. When I met him at Capital Radio, and then I knew him at Radio 1, he was a lovely man. And I remember him telling me the story once that he played the world premiere spin of Hey Jude in 1968 on the radio.
Wow.
And he said, I said, oh, imagine pressing the button and the first, and they hear it. And I said, how did you do it? He said, well, I think we had to play it at 5 o'clock, something. And so I was on 4 hours. So at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, rock, every hour, I said, and coming up in 2 hours' time, Hey Jude, don't miss it. That's coming up at 5. So what a tease. Yeah. What a tease. Hey Jude. Oh my God, what's this? It's the new Beatles single was like a thing. What a thing. And I love that song. I'm going to have it at my funeral. My kids can't play Hey Jude now. They love the Beatles too, because they've matched my
told them that.
Exactly. It's kind of spoilt it. And fun. This is a terrible, terrible name drop, but I was once interviewing Salman Rushdie. Is it a name drop? And I was once interviewing him. We were talking about the 60s and music. And Hey Jude, the movement you need is on your shoulder. And I remember he said, it doesn't mean anything, but it seems to mean everything. Yeah. And I thought, God, that's spot on. And that's John said, keep that bit, Paul, keep that bit in the song. Yeah. And it has a hymnal quality. I just find it incredibly moving. And you know that bit where they go, so let it out and let it in. It's like the sun coming out. Yeah. That bit. It's like a flowering, a belonging, a discovery of something amazing. So it'll be Hey Jude.
Very good. I need 2 others though.
That took up all my time. A film. Is that the one? Is that the film? There?
Anything it doesn't matter whether it's a film, whether it's a place.
The place would be the Highlands.
Yeah,
we took our holidays in the Highlands. The smell of the heather, the smell of the ferns, the burns, and the fields and the farms and the midges and the rain. I just absolutely adored it. We had a cottage that they rented for the first kind of 8-9 years, which didn't have electricity, had an outside loo. Then I think Dad's mum died, and so they got a couple of £1,000 and they bought this other house and they did it up, and I just adored it. And then I've got a place up in the Highlands as well. It's where I feel happiest, the Western Highlands. It's just overwhelmingly spiritually beautiful. So
first port of call once we're allowed to get back on the motorways.
Yeah. I love Ring of Bright Water as well, and there's Camus Fiarna in the book, but it's Sandegg in real life, and I go to a place very near there, and I mention Gavin Maxwell's Ring of Bright Water in the book. It's maybe I'll take that with me.
Wonderful. Well, give me a film as well then. You're only allowed one more.
Well, I got a book.
Great.
I got a book. I thought about it, and I did think earlier on when you told me about this that this would be the book, because Richard Dawkins had that phrase, the magic of reality, and that science is more marvelous, more spiritually, broadly speaking, to use that word spiritually, inspiring, spine-tinglingly amazing than anything in the scriptures. And I think I've really got into that, and I've got into that whole idea of common ancestry, that 6 million years ago, which is like that in the span of time, we share a common ancestor with the chimp. And you look at chimps now and you can see us, and I know primatologists, and it's just amazing. The first 2 years of a chimp's life and a baby's life, they use all the same hand signals. I just think an orangutan, what's happening to them is terrible, but the greater, incredible. And that whole going back through the canyon of time. And so I'd have... on the origin of species, Charles Darwin, I'd have with me. Although evolutionary biology has moved on so much, he didn't know about DNA. He didn't know about genetics. He didn't know about any of that stuff. So this is extraordinary. This book. His suppositions and his theories have all, nothing has been proven wrong. The thing he had a problem with was he didn't think the Earth was perhaps older than 100,000 years. And what he had a real problem with was how this would all have happened in 100,000 years. Yes. But of course, it all happened in 4.5 billion years, as we found out. And just the last paragraph in this, I think, is incredible. And he uses the word creator here in a figurative way, but you can take it any way you want. And he talks about it. And I always send this to religious people. And I said, who wrote that? So I don't know. I said, Charles Darwin. And they went, really? This bit here. There is grandeur in this view of life, with its several powers, having been originally breathed by the Creator into a few forms or into one, and that, whilst this planet has gone cycling on according to the fixed law of gravity, from so simple a beginning, endless forms, most beautiful and most wonderful, have been and are being evolved. Just love that.
Yeah.
Charlie.
Nicky, thank you so much for your time. And for just telling us your story in such a powerful and such a frank and open way. It's really appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me on, and thank you for reading the book and for letting me asking some great questions. Thanks, Andy.
Great. Nicky's life, as I've said throughout this interview, was until 2013 something of a slow-moving crisis. He says himself that his adoption provided a drive and ambition that led him to being so successful. But it also laid the tracks for a darker, more difficult journey, a journey to discover his identity, and which ultimately led to the bipolar diagnosis he shares with his birth mother. Nicky's such a thoughtful bloke. You could almost feel him reliving those difficult moments as we spoke. And there have been many, perhaps most importantly, the struggle to come to terms with the paradox of adoption, as he calls it, that he wanted to belong with his birth mother, but he didn't want that to mean that he'd no longer belong with his mum and dad. Nicky's analysis of that paradox and how he managed to resolve it, I thought, carried wider lessons for anyone in crisis. As he puts it, it's okay not to know how to feel, and it's okay to feel nothing, to just go with the flow. So simple, it's an approach I think we can all deploy from time to time. The dogs in Nicky's life have clearly played an important part too. His love of animals runs so deep and has clearly given him incredible support over the years. We've heard from other guests about the role our pets play at times of crisis. His fellow broadcaster, Jenny Murray, said the same. But Nicky believes passionately that our dogs in particular show us how to handle crisis by living every day in the present, unencumbered and with constant enthusiasm. I couldn't agree more. Thanks for listening to Crisis What Crisis. Feel free to send us your feedback. You'll find our contact details and our show notes giving you the key insights from our guests at crisiswhatcrisis.com. There are also links to our newsletter, Facebook page and Instagram. There are more useful conversations on the way soon, and if you enjoyed this podcast, please do give us a rating and a review. Thanks again.